Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. We're still sort of reeling from this case. Of course, this is the Kohberger case, and we're the Idaho 4. We try not even to use his name, but I think this thumbnail says it all in regards to this is what he's got to look forward to when you think of the darkness of this thumbnail and the darkness of sitting in a prison cell, not jail anymore, prison for the rest of your life. And what we've heard from both the sentencing hearing and from the plea deal hearing is just inexplicable. And how, when we look at this person, if you could even call him a person, you see him up on the screen, he just seems so robotic and so void of feelings and so void of a brain between those two big ears he has there. It's hard to have any, well, I have zero sympathy for him, but to think of this individual is just, you think of him as a sociopath, as a psychopath. And nothing could have been better the other day than the impact hearings we heard from members of the families of the victims. And to just see how this murderer, BK, we'll call him, we don't want to use his name, how he just sat there staring out, almost robotic, And some of the things we've learned since then, more than 300 documents released by the Moscow Police Department on Wednesday revealed grisly new details about the 2022 murders of the 4 University of Idaho students and the exhaustive investigation that led to BK being apprehended. And he was, of course, sentenced to life in prison on Wednesday after pleading guilty to fatally stabbing college seniors Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. And we're going to go into that and our feelings about this case and what it's meant to a lot of different people that have followed this since November 13th, 2022. So hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your cup of coffee, hold on to your feelings. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting. From Major League Baseball, UFC to tennis, and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Head to the website today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joining me this afternoon is none other than retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney, voice of reason. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good to see you. Thank you for having me on. Good afternoon.
Mike, one of the things that I felt the other day during all those impact statements, in addition to a deep sense of sadness and a deep sense of just horror at what happened, not just to these victims, but to the families of these victims and how they've had to endure this for 2.5 years. And that really somewhat, well, it bothered me. It did bother me. And I worry about some of the victims even now going on with their lives. How are they going to go on with their lives after this, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, when you look at that, people don't understand, maybe criminals don't understand if they hurt someone, if they commit a homicide against someone, they think, okay, that's it. They don't realize it's like a pebble in a still pond. You drop it in and the waves go, ripples go out and everyone is affected. Little sisters, big sisters, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, because everyone is connected to someone else. And so therefore, to see these people, it took 2 years and 9 months for them to seek a little bit of get back, a little bit of justice. And some people are making amazing strides and the ability to keep themselves together for the sake of their families because they have to be strong for everyone else besides themselves. And other people, like poor Dylan, who is still reeling from understanding how close she herself came to being one, to be a homicide victim in this case. So it was heartbreaking, but I was glad to see that a number of people were able to gather the strength and just put this killer in his place by getting to him and talking about him and calling him names. I mean, doesn't sound like a lot, but it shows a strength of character that they have and that they are somehow recovering themselves.
Yeah, Dylan Mortensen's testimony was truly, truly heartbreaking. And just to see what she went through, what she's going through, and what she will continue to go through for the rest of her life. You never, ever get over that. Time heals somewhat, but it doesn't erase,
Right.
It heals the wounds. It gets a little better every day, every week, every month, every year, but it'll always be in your psyche, something you have to deal with. There was a lot of questions in regards to this Bill Thompson. A lot of people criticized him as being a weak prosecutor, that he didn't want to take this case to trial. And he's been criticized. But I want to play a little bit of this from the Today Show.
Bryan Kohberger, now inmate 163214, beginning life in this Idaho maximum security prison. But for the families of the victims, still so many questions about why he murdered Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin.
It would always be nice to have an answer to everything, but the reality is that we don't always have that luxury.
Lead prosecutor Bill Thompson finally free to speak, sitting down with us after the release of hundreds of documents related to the case, including one revealing in the weeks before the murders, Kaylee Gonzalez thought she was being followed. And a chilling tip from a woman who said she matched with Kohberger on the dating app Tinder. She told them he asked her what she thought would be the worst way to die. When she responded, by knife, Kohberger allegedly said, like a K-bar, his future murder weapon.
So, Mike, just, what we had been saying throughout this case is that you can't count on every bit of evidence being in the court documents.
Right.
This was never in the court documents, right?
Yeah.
And this is circumstantial evidence. But yes, from which inferences are drawn? Powerful circumstantial evidence. I just want all of the YouTubers, all the true crime community that doubted us, the only ones, or not the only ones, but the small percentage of YouTube content creators that actually have experience and knowledge in what we're talking about, and people thoroughly criticize you. These cops don't know what they're talking. You see how much we knew what we were talking about? We knew everything about what we were talking about, Mike.
Right. And the thing about with the gag order is we only heard about how powerful elements of the prosecution's case were not revealed in court until Ann Taylor tried to get them thrown out, and it's to help her client. And then and only then, in defense of introducing this evidence, the prosecution would reveal the existence of the evidence. So Ann Taylor knew about this, but she never tried to get that thrown out. Other things, yes. So that's how we learned about them. We learned about them indirectly. But as people said, the evidence against him was overwhelming. And the people who said that are people who have been prosecutors, homicide detectives, that sort of thing. People who understand how these investigations are conducted and the kind and classification of evidence that is picked up by all kinds of different people coming forward and just working the streets, go digging through clues. Example was an amazing example of what you call, is as you said, circumstantial evidence, because on its own doesn't mean that he didn't know. But isn't it ironic that way that interaction happened? And what does that reveal about the killer's thought process? This stuff is powerful, and I just wish people would really gravitate to people who work in this field and listen to them more than people who just run around spouting rumors.
100%. Let me go back to this video here.
Which still has never been found.
Where is the murder weapon? The clothes you wore that night? What were Kaylee's last words?
Thompson, who negotiated the plea deal that took the death penalty off the table for Kohberger, telling us even if the case went to trial, he believes the families would still never have gotten those answers.
What do you say to those families who feel like that was doing a deal with the devil?
We made a proposal on our terms, not his.
I think there's still those who feel like it's what he wanted was life in prison versus the death penalty.
I don't know what was going through his head or what he wanted.
See, well, I'll comment here. Obviously, the defendant here, the killer, the murderer, BK, wanted life. He chose life over death. So I don't know why the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, won't just say that. He doesn't know what was in his mind. Obviously, he pled guilty. That's what was in his mind. He wanted to live instead of dying. The 4 people that he murdered didn't have that choice. The state now gave him a choice, and that's why people are critical of you, Mr. Thompson. That's why people think maybe ideologically you were against the death penalty and you did not want to go forward with it for that reason. And if that's the reason, that's not your decision to make. The state has the death penalty. And, well, obviously it was your decision to make because you did make it. You made that decision to allow the plea, to 4 counts of first-degree murder with a sentence without life without parole. And of course, there was those who, and many family members, that felt you should have went forward with the trial and went forward with the death penalty. And
100%.
Pursuant to the trial, we would have learned a lot of things that we're never going to learn right now, Mike.
Yeah, look, I dislike the death penalty deeply on many grounds. However, when you are in that position as district attorney and you have 4 people who've been slaughtered in their sleep, and you have the killer in custody, and you have the death penalty, statute, why wouldn't you go? I would. Excuse me. I would. I make a lot of exceptions for my hatred of the death penalty. You have to go for the death penalty in this case, because the next time you get a death penalty case, and you want to go for it, how do you justify it? Say someone killed 2 people. Well, he killed 4, and then you bargained with his attorney for that. So if it's a precedent that you set, you can't say that a person who killed 2 people is more deserving of the death penalty and should get it when you're giving a person who killed 4 people a pass on that. So I think that was really sad on that part. He should have done it. He had all the evidence in his favor. The defense had nothing. They had absolutely no cards to play, and you had a judge who was very strict. I understand why he did it, and there are some people who are in la la land and can't believe that 4 people could be slaughtered this way or whatever it happens to be. But if you don't go for it under these circumstances, when can you go for it in the future? He should have went for it.
Mike, I just have a feeling that, and I don't know this for a fact, but that ideologically, Bill Thompson is against the death penalty.
Yeah.
Let me go back to this.
Way or another, he's going to be in prison until he dies.
He took them from me, my friends, my people who felt like my home.
We also asked Thompson about that emotional sentencing hearing where we heard for the first time from one of the surviving roommates who came face to face with Kohberger the night of the murders.
I had been asked to block his view of her, so she made her statements at the court. That was something I've never experienced before. Watching the strength of that young lady.
The roommate sat next to you, so Bryan Kohberger couldn't see her.
Yes. So she didn't have to see him.
And there's no understanding of why he passed by Dylan and left that night after she saw him.
I'm sure there are theories. Dylan had an angel watching over her.
And I also asked Bill Thompson about the family's concerns that Kohberger might try to get attention and maybe write a book one day. He told me he's already spoken to the families about that and assured them that there are laws in Idaho that would prevent him from ever profiting should he decide to do that, Laura.
Okay, so Liz, what are you learning about what the rest of his life is actually going to look like behind bars, and what's next for the victims' families?
Yeah, well, Laura, this prison here where he's currently at is known for its harsh conditions. It was built to house Idaho's most dangerous and volatile criminals. But the Department of Justice here in the state has not yet said, or the Department of Corrections has not said whether this is where he'll serve his entire life sentence. They're still assessing that as they make a decision in the coming weeks. It's unclear if he's going to be in general population among inmates or whether he will be in solitary confinement. As for the families, I can tell you being there in that sentencing hearing this week and watching them, seeing them deliver those impact statements, you could tell it was a way for them to take a little bit of their power back. And while the families, all of them had different ways of grieving and finding closure through all of this, the hope is that they now at least have some finality.
Well, we know that there's no finality. There's no closure. Stop using those words. You know, I really just, I would think like people in New York that lived in New York City, probably everyone's been a victim of a crime at some time.
Right, somewhere.
Even if it's a robbery, even if it's a grand larceny, even if it's a burglary, you feel you're violated, violated. And here's 4 murders, first degree, their daughters, their son taken from them. There's no closure. Stop using that word, closure. I really feel for these families. I really do, because, and again, there's no closure, but mental health wise, how do you deal with this, Mike? How do you go on with your life when your little girl was taken from you, when your son was taken from you, when 3 young girls were taken? How do you go about your life again? And that's a question I have, because I've seen victimization and I've seen people that had loved ones murdered. There's never closure, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, it turns into survival. You get up in the morning, you have your breakfast, you look over your family and make sure that they're functioning. You put one foot in front of the other. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy, and it doesn't get much easier as you go on. They say time heals everything. It's a nice statement, but there's voids that will never be filled. And so the Gonsalves family, the Morgan family, the Knodel family, and Chapin family have to deal with that. They'll deal with it in their own way, and they'll deal with it over the course of decades and decades. But there's no going back to a previous normalcy. What's going to be normal now is your life now, trying to recover as much as you possibly can. You'll never completely recover. There'll never be closure, but you can heal enough to be able to move on and function as best as you can, because you still have to function as a parent, as a sister, as a family. And that is something that's going to take a long, long time to be able to get to even that state, that level.
100%. This is Bryan Enton from News Nation with a body language expert named Susan Constantine and a forensic psychologist who's a brilliant man. I've seen him on a lot of different channels, Gary Brucato. And I just want to hear what they have to say. This is more of the analysis that I would rather hear than hearing about how horrific the crime scene was. We already knew that, and I don't think we need to spell that out, because I think most people know how horrific it was.
Is psychotic illness and Violence. Dr. Bricado co-wrote this book, The New Evil, Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime. Dr. Bricado, I'll start with you. A lot of people are calling Bryan Kohberger a psychopath. Is that the right term that we should be using?
Dr. Bricado.
Okay, we can't hear Dr. Bricado. Oh, there you are. Sorry, you were silent. Start over. Here, we got you now.
It's not really possible to diagnose somebody with something like psychopathy from an armchair. It would require an extensive examination, at least review of records. But the reality is that certainly there are traits here that would warrant looking into that. The important thing to remember is that a portion of people who have psychopathic traits also have what might be called schizoid autistic detachment, which has nothing to do necessarily with autism. It means that a person has a kind of cold, alien-like rote quality where that person can think of the victims in a very objectified way, like a scientist working on a sample as opposed to a human being. And I think whatever is going on here, that mechanical detachment figures very heavily into the way this was done and the way he was presenting in court.
Yeah, it's interesting you say alien, like that's also the way that one of the victim's sisters, Olivia, described him, as almost being like an alien when she was locked eyes with him. Susan, what do you make of his demeanor, the posture, the lack of facial expressions? I mean, you were looking at him during the sentencing. What's your read?
Well, it's not changed ever since, even when he was pulled over in his car, he always had that very odd stalker-like fixation in his eyes when he was making contact with someone. This has been very consistent throughout. It hasn't changed. So when I'm looking at his demeanor, he's very controlled. He's in a what we call in a very fixated position. His eyes are very wide and open, almost as if he's somewhat paranoid, but he is hyper vigilant. He's hyper aware of everything that's going on around him. He shows little bit of emotion. Every now and then you might see a slight tightening of the lips, or more slightly furrowed of the eyebrows, or more the orbital muscles will tighten up, especially when he was listening to some of those impact statements where the anger, you could see it start to slightly morph and the intensity started to raise, but it was ever so slight because he masks his emotions. And I think part of it is because he cannot show genuine emotions. So whether that's cognitive, neurological, his some sort of psychological issues that he's had, or his autism, where he can't read emotions or emote emotions correctly. But there's definitely something that is creating that distance between one person to another, so they're not feeling any sense of warmth or genuineness from him.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that, Dr. Bricado, what Susan said, because it's something that I've wondered while I was sitting in the courtroom. And I know you can't see inside his brain, obviously, but is he masking how he's feeling? Is he feeling something deep down, or is he actually feeling nothing?
I think this is a good example of where there's a distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy is the skill of being able to read feeling on other people's faces and then react. Compassion has to do with caring about how they feel. Some killers have empathy but lack compassion, and they use that as a tool for luring somebody, for example, in distress, reading their feelings, saying, "You look frightened, let me help you," and then winding up killing the individual or doing horrible things to them because they don't care about them. What you have here is somebody who doesn't even seem to have the wherewithal to fake that basic empathy. Is a sort of a detached quality to the point of not even understanding that it might behoove you, for example, even to pretend that you have some modicum of sorrow or embarrassment or shame or regret. So there seems to be a disconnect there that makes him seem sort of like a calculating machine. And I have to say that his movements and the way he was reacting made me think that for at least some of the time, he was reliving in his mind the images of killing these people and sort of enjoying it. I think that you saw some of these little flickers that made him look alive, but I think he was sitting back and enjoying.
Wow, that was an excellent assessment. And again, Dr. Gary Bricado, like all professional PhDs, doctors, they don't like to give a diagnosis without examining and doing in-depth research on the person. But that was interesting, just basically on what they observed in the courtroom, and we all did. And to me, Bryan Kohberger really just looked like a robot, devoid of feelings, devoid of emotion, as people that were victims to his slaughter were pouring their hearts out, were pouring and trying to get him to react. And yet there was no reaction. There was, or very little. He tried to hide. If he did have or show any emotion, he certainly tried to hide it. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, he certainly did. And I think there was times when poor Dylan was talking that he was just like, didn't care how much, because she was crying because he lacks compassion. He lacks empathy. But because that's outward towards someone else. But I think when Ms. Gonsalves was able to get under his skin by calling him names and just questioning him, I thought his muscles tightened up a little bit. I thought he became a little bit uncomfortable. He can feel, but it's feeling from outward to inward how it affects him. But there's no giving, it's all taking. And so he probably was a little ticked off by what certain people said, and he wasn't happy about it because he's a selfish, narcissistic person. But when other people need, you would think would, if he actually had real human feelings, that he'd feel some sympathy and realization that what he did was so horrific. He didn't have any. He probably saw Dylan as, okay, you're just lucky I let you live. I didn't think about you. I forgot about you. I didn't see you. I was on my way out, whatever happens to be. You came within this close of being killed yourself. It's almost like, I was thinking about it this morning. It's like the Terminator movie, the original Terminator movie. It seems to be mindless, senseless violence. And that's all he's capable of doing. There's no giving with him. It's all taking.
100%. I'm going to play a little bit of this from Kaylee Gonsalves' sister, Alicia.
So sit up straight when I talk to you. How was your life right before you murdered my sisters? Did you prepare for the crime before leaving your apartment? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this time. Why did you choose my sisters? Before making your move, did you approach my sisters? Detail what you were thinking and feeling. Before leaving their home, is there anything else you did? How does it feel to know the only thing you failed more miserably at than being a murderer is trying to be a rapper? Did you recently start shaving or manually pulling out your eyebrows? Why November 13th? Did you truly think your Amazon purchase was untraceable because you used a gift card? How do you find it enjoyable to stargaze with such a severe case of visual snow? Where is the murder weapon? The clothes you wore that night? What did you bring into the house with you? What was the second weapon you used on Kaylee? What were Kaylee's last words? Please describe in detail the level of anxiety you must have felt when you heard the Bearcat pull up to your family home on December 30th, 2022. Which do you regret more? Returning to the crime scene 5 hours later, or never, ever going back to Moscow, not even once, after stalking them there for months? If you were really smart, do you think you'd be here right now? What's it like needing this much attention just to feel real? You're terrified of being ordinary, aren't you? Do you feel anything at all? Or are you exactly what you always feared? Nothing. If you're so powerful, then why are you still hiding, defendant? You see, I'm here today as me. But who are you? Let's try to take off your mask and see. You didn't create devastation. You revealed it in yourself. And that darkness you carry, that emptiness, you'll sit with it long after this is over. That is your sentence. And it was written on the wall long before you ever pled guilty. You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser who thought you were so much smarter than everybody else. Constantly scolding, turning your nose up to grammar mistakes, nitpicking and criticizing others. You wanted so badly to be different, to be special, to be better, to be deep, to be mysterious. You found yourself thinking you were better than everyone else, and you thought you could figure out the human psyche and see through it, all while tweaked out on heroin. Lurking in the shadows made you feel powerful because no one ever paid you any attention in the light.
Thank you.
So that was a tremendous impact statement by Olivia Gonsalves, the sister of Kaylee Gonsalves. And I mean, she asked the questions that I felt the professionals should have asked. Bill Thompson and perhaps Judge Hippler, but that would have had to have taken place in the plea hearing when he pled guilty, and it didn't. So I was very glad that she did. She was spectacular. Mike, we went over a little bit. Your final thoughts.
Bill, I'm glad to see that we as YouTubers and in the field can now rest assured that there's nothing more in this case. He's going to disappear, as Jim Clemente said, down the drain, flush him down the drain. That's it. You don't have to hear from him ever again. There's not going to be any sort of headlines with his name on it. And the families can slowly begin to heal somewhat, however far they can go. But it's now time for that. And so thank goodness for that. And I just want to say a great job that the FBI, Moscow police, the Idaho State Police, everybody did a great job. And I'm glad there's this document dump where people can see how extensive and how comprehensive this investigation was in only 6 weeks. I'm really proud of law enforcement for that.
They did an outstanding job. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. This case is still so heartbreaking to all of us. We'll see you the next time. Have a great day, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.